The pounding on my door at 2 a.m. wasn't what changed my life. It was the blood on her hands. Claire Whitfield stood on my doorstep, her wavy auburn hair wild and tangled, her bright green eyes wide with a terror I'd never seen in the 8 months she'd been my neighbor. Her soft, fair skin was ghostly pale under the porch light, and her voice came out in a shattered whisper that still haunts me. Daniel, there's someone in my house, and I think they left something horrible in my daughter's room. She held up her trembling hands, smeared red, and my entire world tilted on its axis. I grabbed her arm, pulled her inside, and in that single moment, the quiet, careful life I'd built to avoid ever caring about anyone again crumbled completely. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 28, and I'd moved to this small neighborhood on the outskirts of Ashford, Oregon, specifically to disappear. I stood there in my doorway, 6'1", broad-shouldered, still wearing the old shirt I'd fallen asleep in, my dark brown hair a mess. I looked down at the vintage watch on my wrist, my father's watch, the only thing I had left of him, and noted the time, 20:07 a.m. My deep blue eyes met her green ones, and something cracked open inside my chest. I'd spent 2 years avoiding exactly this connection. Concern. The terrifying vulnerability of giving a damn about another human being. But Claire was shaking so hard her silver locket was bouncing against her collarbone, and her 5-year-old daughter Lily was still inside that house. "Stay here," I said, grabbing the flashlight from my kitchen drawer and the baseball bat I kept by the back door. Claire caught my wrist, right over the small compass tattoo inked into my skin, and her grip was ice cold. "Don't go alone," she begged. "Please. You don't understand. It was my ex-husband. Marcus was there. I saw him in the hallway, and he's not supposed to be within 500 feet of us." The fear in her voice was real, primal, and ancient. I'd heard fear like that only once before, the night my father died. I told her to lock the door behind me. Then I walked into the darkness toward her house, my heart hammering, not knowing that what I'd find inside would unravel a secret that went far deeper than a vindictive ex-husband. If this story already has your heart pounding, smash that like button right now and subscribe to this channel, because what happens next is something I never could have predicted. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. See, I'd first met Claire Whitfield on a rainy Tuesday in March, the day she moved in next door with a U-Haul truck and a little girl clutching a stuffed rabbit. I'd been working on my motorcycle in the garage, my leather jacket tossed over a sawhorse, grease on my hands, when I heard the crash. A box of dishes had slipped from the truck ramp and shattered across the wet driveway. Claire stood there in an oversized cardigan and well-fitted jeans, her round, friendly face crumpling as she stared at the broken pieces. Lily started crying. And Claire, instead of breaking down herself, knelt in the rain, hugged her daughter, and said, "It's okay, sweetheart. Broken things just make room for new things." Something about that sentence, spoken by a woman clearly exhausted and heartbroken, hit me like a freight train. I walked over and spent the next 4 hours helping them move in. I told myself it was just being neighborly. I was lying. Over the following weeks, I learned Claire's story in fragments. Her divorce from Marcus Whitfield had been finalized only 2 months before the move. He was a real estate developer with money, influence, and a temper he hid from the world like a loaded weapon. Claire had endured 3 years of escalating control, checking her phone, isolating her from friends, and then the night he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises in the shape of his fingers. She'd filed for divorce the next morning. Marcus had fought it viciously, dragging her through court, threatening to take Lily, spreading lies to mutual friends. But Claire, with her soft freckled cheeks and warm smile, had a spine made of steel beneath all that gentleness. She'd won custody. She'd gotten the restraining order. She'd started over. And she'd landed right next door to me, a man who'd sworn off letting anyone past his walls. I should tell you why. 2 years before Claire moved in, I'd lost my father to a sudden heart attack. He died on a Wednesday afternoon, alone in his workshop. While I was across the country, chasing a career in architectural design that I thought mattered more than Sunday phone calls, I found out 6 hours later. The guilt didn't just eat at me, it hollowed me out. I quit my job, sold my apartment in Chicago, and moved to Ashford to renovate a run-down house and feel nothing. The compass tattoo on my wrist was my reminder. Find your direction. But for 2 years I'd been spinning. Claire and Lily were the first people who made me want to stop. Now I was walking across the dark yard toward Claire's house with a baseball bat, and the front door was wide open. I stepped inside. The living room was trashed, couch cushions thrown, a lamp shattered on the hardwood floor. I swept the flashlight through the kitchen, the hallway, my pulse roaring in my ears. Then I reached Lily's bedroom. The door was open. Inside, the walls had been smeared with red paint, not blood, I realized with a wave of nausea and relief. And scrawled in jagged letters across the wall above her tiny bed were the words, "His mien." Lily's stuffed rabbit had been torn apart and placed on her pillow. But Lily wasn't there. Claire had grabbed her first, gotten her out. Thank God. On the floor, I found a photograph that turned my blood cold. It was a picture of Claire and me, taken from a distance, sitting on my front porch 2 weeks ago, drinking coffee and laughing. Someone had drawn a red X over my face. Marcus wasn't just stalking Claire. He was watching me too. I called the police. They arrived in 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Claire sat on my couch, Lily asleep in her arms, and she told Officer Reyna everything. But here's what the police said that made my stomach drop. Marcus Whitfield had been seen boarding a flight to Seattle that morning. His alibi was airtight. Whoever had been in that house, whoever had done this, officially, it couldn't have been him. Claire looked at me across the room with those bright green eyes swimming with tears, and I saw it clearly. No one was going to help her. The system that was supposed to protect her had a hole in it, the size of a man's fist, and Marcus knew exactly how to exploit it. "You're staying here tonight," I said. It wasn't a question. She didn't argue. I set up the guest bedroom for her and Lily, and as she passed me in the hallway, she paused. Close enough that I could smell the lavender in her hair, see the freckles scattered across her nose. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. I looked at my father's watch. "Because someone should," I said. What I didn't say was, because I've already lost one person I cared about by not showing up, and I will not do it again. Now things are about to take a turn that nobody saw coming. If you want to find out what happens when the truth about Marcus is finally exposed, make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on. Drop a comment right now telling me, do you think Marcus will get away with this? Let's see who guesses right. The next 3 weeks were a slow burning fuse. Claire and Lily stayed in their house during the day, but every night, Claire found a reason to come over. She'd bring homemade soup or banana bread, her curvy figure silhouetted in my doorway, her smile warm, but her eyes always carrying that undercurrent of vigilance. We'd sit on the porch after Lily fell asleep on my couch, the baby monitor between us, and talk. Really talk. She told me about growing up on a farm in Vermont, about her dream of opening a children's bookstore, about the way Marcus had slowly, methodically convinced her she was too stupid, too fat, too boring to be loved by anyone. Each word she said made me want to find Marcus Whitfield and dismantle him with my bare hands. But it also made me want to prove to Claire that every lie he'd told her was exactly that, a lie. I started noticing things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous. The way her freckles darkened slightly when she blushed. The way she always touched her silver locket when she talked about Lily, as if it were a talisman. I started noticing that I was finding excuses to be outside when she left for work, that I was cooking meals large enough for 3, that I'd catch myself smiling, actually smiling, for the first time in 2 years. And one night, sitting on the porch steps, our shoulders almost touching, she turned to me and said, "Daniel, you're the first person in years who's made me feel like I'm not invisible." I looked at her round, kind face, her green eyes catching the porch light, and the walls I'd spent 2 years building came down like paper. I kissed her. It was soft, tentative, almost a question. She kissed me back, and it was the answer. But Marcus hadn't disappeared. He'd been planning. 2 days after that kiss, Claire found an envelope in her mailbox. Inside were printed screenshots of her bank accounts, her medical records, and Lily's school enrollment forms. Information that should have been impossible for him to access. Attached was a typed note. "I told you I'd always find you. Drop the restraining order and come home, or I'll take everything." Starting with her. Claire's hands shook so badly the papers scattered across her kitchen floor. I knelt beside her, gathered them up, and made a decision that would put me directly in the crosshairs. I hired a private investigator named Rosa Gutierrez. She was sharp, relentless, and she owed me a favor from my Chicago days. Within a week, Rosa uncovered something that blew the case wide open. Marcus hadn't been working alone. His younger brother, Jason Whitfield, lived 40 minutes away in Medford. While Marcus had carefully constructed his Seattle alibi on the night of the break-in, Jason had been the one who'd entered Claire's house. Security camera footage from a gas station 2 miles away showed Jason's car at 1:47 a.m. that night. But that wasn't the real bombshell. Rosa dug deeper into Marcus's finances and found something chilling. He'd been paying a clerk in the county courthouse to feed him information about Claire's case. That was how he'd gotten her records. That was how he'd stayed one step ahead. He'd corrupted the very system designed to protect her. I brought everything to Claire. She sat at my kitchen table, Lily coloring in the next room, and read through Rosa's findings. When she finished, she looked up at me, and for the first time, the fear in her eyes was gone. In its place was something fierce and blazing. "I'm not running anymore," she said. I reached across the table and took her hand. "You won't have to." But Marcus made his move before we could make ours. 3 days later, I came home from the hardware store to find Claire on her front lawn, white-faced. A custody challenge had been filed. Marcus was claiming Claire was an unfit mother, citing instability, an inappropriate relationship with a male neighbor, and failure to maintain a safe home environment. He'd twisted the break-in, which his own brother had committed, into evidence of her negligence. The court date was set for 6 weeks out, and Marcus had hired the most expensive family attorney in the state. Claire had a public defender. The scales weren't just tipped, they were shattered. If this story is hitting you right in the heart, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button, because every single like helps this story reach someone else who needs to hear it. And drop a comment below. Have you ever had to fight for something everyone told you that you couldn't win? Tell me your story. I read every single comment, goss. That night, Claire broke down. She sat on my bedroom floor, where she'd been sleeping for the past week, because she was too afraid to stay in her own house after dark, and sobbed with a grief that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than fear. It came from exhaustion, from years of fighting a man who had more power, more money, and more cruelty than she could match. I sat down beside her and pulled her into my arms. She pressed her face into my chest, her tears soaking through my shirt, her fingers gripping the fabric like I was the only solid thing in her world. I can't lose her, she whispered. She's everything. I held her tighter. You won't lose her, I promise you. It was a promise I had no right to make. But I meant it with every cell in my body. I spent the next 5 weeks preparing like my life depended on it. Because Claire's did. I liquidated my savings, $32,000 earmarked for the house renovation, and hired a real attorney. A woman named Patricia Soto, who had a reputation for dismantling men like Marcus in courtrooms. Patricia took one look at Rose's evidence and smiled the way a surgeon smiles before a precise incision. She subpoenaed the courthouse clerk. She obtained the gas station footage of Jason's car. She compiled 3 years of documentation, police reports, medical records, character witnesses, that painted the full picture of Marcus Whitfield's abuse. And she did something Marcus never expected. She counterfiled. Attempted intimidation, stalking, criminal conspiracy, obstruction of a restraining order. Marcus had spent years believing he was untouchable. Patricia was about to prove him wrong. The day of the hearing, Claire stood in my living room in a deep green blouse that made her eyes luminous. Her auburn hair brushed smooth, her silver locket resting against her chest. She looked at me, and I saw the fear. But I also saw the courage it took to walk into that courtroom and face the man who'd tried to destroy her. I straightened my collar, ran my thumb over my father's watch, and said, "No matter what happens in there, you are the bravest person I've ever known." She pressed her palm against my chest, right over my heart, and whispered, "You gave me the courage." The courtroom was packed. Marcus sat at his table in a designer suit, his expression composed, radiating the confidence of a man who'd never lost. His attorney painted Claire as erratic, emotionally unstable, involved with a questionable neighbor. I sat in the gallery and felt my jaw clench so hard my teeth ached. Then Patricia Soto stood up, and what followed was a masterclass in justice. She presented the gas station footage. She called the courthouse clerk, who, facing criminal charges of his own, admitted Marcus had paid him $4,000 for access to Claire's files. She played a voicemail Marcus had left on Jason's phone, recovered by Rosa, in which Marcus explicitly instructed his brother to make her afraid enough to come back. The courtroom went silent. Marcus's composure cracked. His attorney requested a recess. The judge denied it. When the judge delivered her ruling, Claire gripped my hand so hard I lost feeling in my fingers. Full custody to Claire. Restraining order extended to 5 years, now including Jason Whitfield. Criminal referral for Marcus on charges of stalking, conspiracy, and witness tampering. And then the judge said something that made Claire's breath catch. "Mrs. Whitfield, this court recognizes your extraordinary courage in protecting your daughter. No one should have to fight this hard for safety." Claire didn't cry. She sat perfectly still, her green eyes shining, her chin lifted, and she simply nodded. The war was over. She had won. Right now, if you're feeling what I'm feeling, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. Send it to a friend. Post it on your story. Because stories like Claire's remind us that courage wins, even when the odds are impossible. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe and join this family us. That evening, after Lily was asleep in her own bed in her own room with freshly painted walls, lavender this time, with butterflies I'd stenciled myself, Claire and I stood on my front porch. The same porch where we'd shared our first conversations, our first coffee, our first kiss. The night air smelled like pine and rain. She leaned against me, her soft warmth fitting against my side like she'd always belonged there, and said, "Daniel, you spent your entire savings on me." I looked down at her, this incredible, resilient, beautiful woman with her freckles and her fierce heart. "I spent it on something that mattered," I said. She lifted her face. "When did you know?" she asked. I didn't have to ask what she meant. The first day. The broken dishes in the rain. You told Lily that broken things make room for new things. I was broken, Claire. You were the new thing. She kissed me under the porch light, slow and deep, and I felt every fractured piece of my life shift into place. My father's watch ticked steadily against my wrist. The compass tattoo pointed nowhere and everywhere at once. I'd spent 2 years lost, and this woman, this brave, warm, impossibly strong woman, had led me home. 6 months later, I stood in a small bookstore on Main Street, Lily's Pages. The sign read, painted in bright, whimsical letters, and watched Claire ring up her first customer. She wore a flowing burgundy blouse and her silver locket, and her round cheeks were flushed pink with excitement. Lily sat in the children's corner, reading to a group of toddlers with the seriousness of a tenured professor. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Peace. Purpose. Home. Marcus Whitfield pled guilty to reduced charges and served 14 months. Jason received probation. The courthouse clerk was fired and charged. Claire never heard from either brother again. She didn't need to. She'd already moved so far beyond them that they were nothing but shadows in a story she'd already finished telling. 1 year after that knock on my door at 2 a.m., I asked Claire to marry me. I did it on the front porch at 2 a.m. because I wanted to reclaim that hour. I wanted to turn the worst moment of her life into the beginning of the best. She said yes before I finished the question, laughing and crying at the same time, her green eyes crinkling at the corners. Lily, who'd been watching from the window in her pajamas, threw open the door and launched herself into our arms. I slipped a ring onto Claire's finger, and she pressed her hand against my chest again, right over my heart. "You answered the door," she said. "That's all it took. You just answered the door." And she was right. That's the truth no one tells you about love, about courage, about changing your life. It doesn't always require grand gestures or impossible bravery. Sometimes it just requires you to open the door at 2 a.m. when someone needs you. Sometimes it requires you to stop hiding from the world and step into it, messy and broken and terrified, and choose to care anyway. My father died alone because I wasn't there. I will spend the rest of my life being there. For Claire, for Lily, for the family I never expected and now cannot imagine living without. Broken things make room for new things. She told me that on a rainy Tuesday in March, standing in a pile of shattered dishes. She was right about the dishes. She was right about me. And if you're sitting here, at the end of this story, and something in your chest feels a little different than it did 15 minutes ago, then maybe she's right about you two. If this story moved you, if it made you believe that showing up for someone can change everything, then do me one last favor. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they're not alone, that love still wins, and that the right person will answer the door at 2 a.m. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one moment when someone showed up for you when you needed it most? I read every single comment, and your story might just be the one that changes someone else's life. Until next time, remember the door is always worth opening. I'll see you in the next one.